Hello, long time no see. To explain the lateness of this 2025 reading wrap-up, I had sort of decided that I wasn't going to do one, but it just felt wrong to not reflect on the books I read last year, especially because I read so many amazing ones. So I've had a little think, I've had a little ponder, and I have, with not insignificant difficulty, laid out the top 10 books I read in 2025. It's never too late to talk about amazing books. So settle in, get cozy, and without further ado, let's get into it. I gotta say, it feels really good to be back here talking about books. I should probably preface this by saying I read over 60 books in 2025. Number's not important, but it does show just how excellent these books are to have made it to my top 10. Okay? So in the coveted 10th place position, we have 11% by Maren Uthaug. This is a Danish book that my sister recommended, and it's part of a speculative duology set in a future Denmark where there are no men. Yeah. Utopian much? But actually what I love about it is that it doesn't totally feel utopian. And the way my sister and I talked about it is like we're living in one end of the patriarchal spectrum, and this book takes us all the way to the other side and all the negatives that come with that. For example, men are kept imprisoned in this place where they are basically at women's disposal, and it's extremely messed up. But I feel like the author's asking some very compelling questions about what society could look like if we took it to the entire polar opposite side of the spectrum. 11% was recently translated into English, and I recommend this book to people who are interested in speculative fiction and reading stories that explore questions about what the world could look like and what it would mean for us. Next on the list, in 9th position, we have The 7 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. You may have seen my video discussing whether this is the perfect whodunit, so if you want to hear my in-depth thoughts about this book, check that out. In the time since I've read this book, I feel like it's percolated, and I find myself wanting to read it again knowing what I know now. I just thought this book was so unique, so well written, so stylish, so intriguing. I was always itching to turn the page to see where the story was going and what was going to happen to the characters. While I do feel like Stuart Turton did a great job of writing different perspectives for the character and showing how their status, their looks, and everything changed how people perceive them and changed the whole trajectory of their position in the world, I feel like he took it a bit far with the fat phobia. That's something I should have mentioned in my video about it, and I apologize for not flagging that earlier. It really was it was a bit much. That being said, I think this holds up as a fantastic book that I recommend to people who are interested in mysteries, especially murder mysteries that blend with a speculative element, and I'm looking forward to reading it again. Alright, next up we have the only non-fiction book on this list, which is Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. The audiobook I listened to is read by the author, and I have such fond memories of sitting during my lunch breaks, eating delicious pad thai from the market by my work, and listening to the author's wonderful indigenous pearls of wisdom. This is such a wonderful and beautifully written book that at its core explores our relationship with nature and the value that we have to gain from it, obviously. The author draws on her experience as a mother and a botanist and an indigenous person to weave together beautiful, I guess you could call them like personal essays, exploring different topics. Anyone who cares even a smidge about our planet can see how far removed we have become from nature, and I think Braiding Sweetgrass is such a beautiful meditative reminder of the importance of reconnecting with nature and acknowledging its importance. I truly recommend this book to anybody, but especially to people who feel disheartened by the state of the world, I think this book can bring you great comfort, as it did to me. Now, in place number 7, we have Jackal by Aaron E. Adams. In the break room of the bookshop where I work, we have stacks on stacks of proofs that have been sent to us by publishers, and I noticed this book in the pile and was instantly drawn to it. I just thought it was really nice. The floppy pages, the typeface, the cover, everything about it I really liked. And even though my reason for picking it up was that I'm a shallow bitch, I'm glad I did, because it turned out to be so good. It follows what I'm realizing is one of my favorite tropes, which is an adult forced to return to the childhood home in a remote small town where there are lots of unpleasant memories, which is exactly what happens in this book when Liz has to return home for her best friend's wedding. The real drama starts when her best friend's daughter goes missing, joining a long list of Black girls who have gone missing in this predominantly white town. And I was just really struck by this story. The writing style can take some getting used to, I think, because it has very short sentences and can feel a little choppy, but I think when you get into the flow, there are some really beautiful lines that can hit with a sucker punch. I just really enjoyed the mystery and the magical realism element. So I recommend this to people who would also be interested in those things. Then in 6th place, we have The Safe Keep by Yael van der Vouten, which you probably have heard of because it was shortlisted for the Booker Prize last year and also won the Women's Prize for Fiction. Overall, I thought this was beautifully written, very striking prose, intriguing characters, and a story or twist that you can't really predict. It was at once a very beautiful love story between these two women and also a poignant reflection on some of the horrors that people had to endure during World War II. Now we're getting to the top 5 books, and in 5th place we have another Booker shortlisted title, which is James by Percival Everett. Oh my gosh, this book is so good. The audiobook, narrated by Dominic Hoffman, is fantastic. Again, you may have heard of this one. It's a reimagining of the adventures of Huckleberry Finn from the perspective of the enslaved person Jim. To be frank, I followed this up with Huckleberry Finn, and I would say just skip Huckleberry Finn if you haven't read it, and just read James, because it is much, much, much better in my opinion. I was on edge. I wanted to keep reading to make sure that James made it through. I was distraught, disturbed, betrayed, bewildered. And overall, I just felt many, many emotions for this book. Like with Braiding Sweetgrass, I think this is a very important book that everyone should read. Although, of course, I recommend checking trigger warnings because it's set during times of slavery in the United States. I thought it was fantastic and should have won the Booker Prize, having read the winner. Now in 4th place, and I can't believe I'm saying this, is Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmis. I thought this was commercial, crowd-pleasing garbage. But just like with The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, I was very pleasantly surprised when I found that Lessons in Chemistry was actually very, very good. In fact, I absolutely loved it from the first page. It had so much style in the writing. It had the most lovable characters, and as soon as I finished it, I just burst into tears.
No, but it's not funny. At the end of the day, is it? It's serious.
Don't get me wrong, it's very sad. And again, I recommend checking trigger warnings because there are some upsetting scenes in this. Not surprising considering it follows a woman scientist fighting tooth and nail to be seen in a horribly patriarchal 1960s America. Or is it 1950s? Either one. But she's a hero, and I really loved it so much that it became an instant favorite. I will say this is not a book that explores intersectional feminism. It is very much about the plight of like the white American housewife of the 1950s, 60s. So good to be aware of that. But there's no denying that they struggled, and I feel like this book does such a great job of capturing that. And and I loved it. Pull yourself together. I forgot to hold up the book that whole time, but I do have this beautiful copy of it, which was in the box that Penguin sent me. Thank you, Penguin, for sending me this wonderful, wonderful book. You know, I'm putting these in rank order, but I feel like I could have shuffled these around because because I just loved them so much, many of these books. In third place, we have The Lies of Locke Lamora by Scott Lynch. This is changing it up a bit because this is a fantasy book. It's the first in the Gentleman Bastard series. If you like gentleman thieves and heists and amazing world building, you need to read this book. It's just so good. The characters are so charming. They are always outwitting their foes and just like wreaking havoc, but in the best way possible. Once again, I listened to this and can highly recommend the audiobooks narrated by Michael Page. You know those fantasy audiobooks that have the perfect narration to make you feel so cozy and warm? That's exactly what this audiobook is like. I just love this series and I can't wait to continue. Oh my gosh, I feel like my heart rate is increasing as I get to my favorite books of the year. Second on the list, we have Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn. Listen, I don't really like crime novels, and I can understand looking at this and judging it. But what you have to understand, and what I recently understood, is that Gillian Flynn falls into a wonderful category called literary thrillers. And that, my friend, is right up my alley. She is such a fantastic writer. Her prose is... and I'm obsessed with everything she's written. Gone Girl was no exception. I couldn't stop reading it. I couldn't put it down. Even though I had seen the movie, I already knew what was going to happen, but I was just so drawn in by her writing. And yeah, I feel like anyone who wants to get into reading or wants to get out of a reading slump should read Gillian Flynn. Now, don't get me wrong, the characters in this book, extremely unlikable. They make very horrible comments about people. They do terrible things. And I wasn't rooting for either of them, but I kind of loved that. I wanted to see the depths they would go to get revenge on each other. Until Gillian Flynn comes out with a new book, if she ever does, I will just keep rereading her 3 books, and I will love every moment. Oh my gosh, I can't believe we've made it to my all-time favorite book of 2025.
Drumroll, please.
And that is Coffin Moon by Keith Rawson. Once again, this was a book that I requested from a publisher, not least because the cover was freaking awesome, but also because the story sounded so cool. Listen to this. A gritty vampire revenge novel set in 1970s Portland, Oregon. This did not disappoint. I was hooked from the very first line. There's nothing I love more than discovering a new writer who has a distinct style and voice. I loved the way he portrayed vampires. I loved how gruesome it was. And I was enthralled, frankly. But it wasn't just the writing. I thought the story and the characters were so fascinating, and I'd never read anything like it. So I am very excited to read the duology that Keith Rawson is famous for, because look at how cool they look too. I'm so excited. So there you have it, my top 10 favorite books of 2025. And if I may say so myself, that is quite the mix. We've got literary fiction, we've got historical fiction, we've got crime thrillers, we've got sci-fi, we've got fantasy, we've got nonfiction. We've got a little bit of everything on this list. It was truly a wonderful year of reading. I feel like I said that last year, but what can I say? I pick 'em well. And speaking of, there were even more books that I thought were fantastic this year. So here are some of my honorable mentions. Check these books out. They're great. We've got, again, literary fiction, speculative, poetry, and another science fiction thriller. I also thought it would be fun to look back on the 3 loose goals I set for the year in my last annual reading wrap up and see how I did in achieving them. Goal number 1, read more nonfiction. I'm pleased to say that I went from 10% nonfiction in 2024 to 20% nonfiction in 2025. So, check! Goal number 2 was to make more of a conscious effort to read books by authors from diverse backgrounds and or from backgrounds different from my own. And I can say that I definitely did make a more concerted effort to do this. I didn't look at my statistics for 2024, but in 2025, a little over a quarter of the books I read were by authors of color, and about 1 in 5 were either by LGBTQIA plus authors or had significant LGBTQIA plus representation. And the third goal was to read even more, and I did exceed my goal to read 60 books, and I read 10 more books in 2025 than I did in 2024. So, check, check, check. What are some of my goals for this year, you ask? Well, last year my goal was to read even more. This year, I am reimagining that goal. I want to focus less on the number of books I'm reading this year and more on tackling challenging books. So whether that is reading the big doorstopper books that I'm always scared to pick up because I know they'll take me a really long time, or reading books in Danish, which is my second language, which again is more challenging than reading in English and therefore takes me longer, or reading dense classics like Russian literature.
I'm in danger!
My second goal, which seems to be a common goal across the board this year, which I think is a very good thing, is to tackle my physical to read lists. I feel working at a bookshop and having my generous discount has led me to buy a lot of books this year, and I want to focus more on actually reading the books that I own this year, which also involves rereading books from my library, because I feel like there are so many amazing ones that I've only read once that I probably have forgotten and that I want to dive back into this year. So yeah, that pretty much sums it up. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to reflect on the wonderful books that I read last year. What was your favorite book of 2025? I would love to hear. And do you have any reading goals for this year? I hope you're having a lovely start to 2026, and I'll see you again soon. Bye!